Hey everyone, let me welcome you. We're going to get started in just a few minutes and we'll wait for others to join us. But as you are getting settled in, let me invite you to participate in our poll questions. There are 3 of them and you can just scroll through and we'll come back to answer those in a little bit. If you're just joining us, we are going to get started in 1 more minute, and I just invite you to answer the poll questions. There are 3 of them, so scroll through, and we will get started very quickly. All right, we have a very full session today, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Feel free to fill out the poll questions, and I am delighted to welcome you to the 2nd of our speaker series, sponsored by Town Bank, our IWL Women Money speaker series. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Town Bank, for this series, and let's start off today with a brief word from them.
When you live in Wisconsin, you work hard, but you also don't take yourself too seriously. This place is unique, and so are you. Your bank should know that. At Town Bank, we do, because this is our home too, and we're proud to be Wisconsin's bank.
We are very grateful for their support in all of these speaker series that we've had, and we invite you to join us for each of these. As I said, this is our 2nd, and we will have 1 more in December. Let me introduce myself. I'm Andrea Schneider, professor of law at Marquette University, and I'm honored to be the inaugural director of the Institute for Women's Leadership. The Institute was founded in 2019 with a generous endowment from the Rolfs Family Foundation, and we are extremely grateful for their generosity and foresight in establishing this. Our vision is one of equity and inclusion across gender and other intersecting social identities. Our goals are to advance women's leadership locally and globally through pioneering research, innovative programming, and collaborative engagement. This speaker series that you have today is a perfect example of how all of this can be linked together. Our work across the community with partners in the city, based on research and in collaboration with them, we hope to provide programming that will make a difference here and around the country. I'd like to thank our steering committee, who represents a variety of women's organizations in Milwaukee that help us build this community together. And we are very grateful for their time and expertise. And we are particularly grateful to the Women's Leadership Collaborative, with whom we look forward to working for many years as we strive to make Milwaukee a destination city for all of us. So let's turn to those poll questions. As they suggest, we are focusing today on women and ownership, and to think about exactly what we know about the status of women in Milwaukee, and then to get a little bit of a sense of what's happening here in the audience. So The correct answer is actually that the vast majority of businesses in Wisconsin are small. It's actually 85% are small and micro businesses. And of those 80%, the majority of those are micro businesses, those employing under 20 people. So we'll hear a little bit about that today. For our second question, I see that we are, as you can scroll through the answers, most of you thought about 28 to 33% were thinking about new businesses. It's actually less at about 17%, but I love that we are all thinking about what the next gig is. And so in looking at the answers to our third question of who is joining us, all of us are here to support women-owned businesses and really to get a sense that about 40 of us are thinking about turning that side hustle into full-time. Some have already started their own business and so forth. So that's really helpful in us thinking about where we want to go from here and what we can learn from our terrific panelists today as we consider ourselves either supporters of women-owned businesses, perhaps one of those people ourselves, either now or down the road. So this amazing panel that we have to take us through what's actually happening right now, what lessons that they've learned on each of their journeys as policymakers, supporters, and funders of women-owned businesses and business owners themselves, and how we can take all of this information and move ourselves forward. I'm going to tell you briefly about each of them and then turn it quickly over to our speakers so that they have the majority of our time. Geri Sanchez Aglipay directs the Small Business Majority's national outreach, education, and policy efforts. As a former solo entrepreneur, she's passionate about helping others strengthen their asset building through entrepreneurship. She hopes to build an inclusive economy that works for all, especially women, communities of color, and the underserved. She has served on boards such as the American Public Health Association's Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. She has extensive professional and volunteer experience on issues impacting people of color, especially in the areas of public health, civil rights, and civic affairs. Wendy Baumann serves as the president and CBO of the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, better known as WWBIC to all of us, a statewide economic development corporation. She accepted this challenging position in the community in 1994, so has been in this for a while, helping us providing leadership required to ensure the achievement of WWBIC's mission, uphold the philosophy of serving businesses owned by women, minorities, and low-wealth individuals in Wisconsin. Wendy served as the executive director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Wisconsin in 1987 and 88. And during that time, the chamber was honored as the Hispanic Chamber of the Year by the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And under her direction, the membership organization was recognized at a state and national level. Wendy received her master's and baccalaureate degrees from UWM and was honored as a graduate of the last decade in 1998. Bonnie Edwards earned both her bachelor's and master's degree at Alverno College, as well as 2 advanced teaching licenses, which helped her fulfill her meaningful teaching career. Stepping out of retirement, she purchased a Club Z tutoring services franchise, which provides in-home and online tutoring to students of all ages throughout the U.S. And since her successful grand opening, Bonnie has expanded her franchise and continues to work with several families on plans for growth throughout the new school year. Our other business owner joining us to talk today is Anne Marie Arroyo, who spent 15 years in the restaurant industry and has always had a passion for hospitality. She's a connected member of the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, through which she worked with WWBIC to develop her first restaurant, MOXIE. Arroyo and her wife, Tamala Green, developed their new Italian restaurant, Trouble & Sons, with the community in mind, and by doing so, provide a wonderful, and let me say, very yummy experience for all to enjoy. So we are really excited to hear from all 4 of our panelists. We're going to start with Wendy, we'll then hear from Geri, and then we'll hear from everybody as they walk through lessons learned and their own experiences. Let me note that we'll be leaving time at the end for questions. Those can go in the chat, and I will be monitoring those and bring all of our audience together at the end. With no further ado, let me turn this over to you, Wendy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, Marquette University, for having the foresight to have a series like this and to advance that focus on women and impact and our future. And also thank you to Town Bank, a long-standing also supporter of WWBIC. So we appreciate all of that. And the steering committee, which is great too. On those questions, I provided those questions to the team, and it's interesting. I want to relook at that last question about percentage of people thinking of starting a business, because that stat might be a year or so old. And I'm wondering, during this time of economic crisis, health crisis, social justice crisis, if that might have eked up a little bit. So I might get back to you on that. You can maybe share that at a future piece. A lot of PowerPoint slides here, but I will share them briefly to paint a picture and set the tone and the scene for this. Of course, who's going to steal the entire show will be Anne Marie and Bonnie, real life entrepreneurs, talk a bit about themselves, talk a bit about their entrepreneurial journey, and then we really as individuals in the Milwaukee area, what we can do to help foster that further for women and other individuals. Because again, if you look at that, 85% of all the businesses in the state of Wisconsin are really micro and small businesses, employing huge numbers in smaller amounts, but huge numbers. And Anne Marie specifically will talk about many individuals she employs, as well as Bonnie. So you can go to the next slide, but all of these photos are real life entrepreneurs. We never use clip art at WWBIC, because if you use clip art, you're hanging around with ugly people. And our people are not ugly. They're beautiful entrepreneurs and business owners that came to us in need of some business training, access to capital, just someone to bounce some ideas off of. So WWBIC was founded in 1987. Next year, we'll celebrate 35 years of impact. And our largest office is in the greater Milwaukee area that embraces Wauwatosa, West Allis, and Waukesha. We also have offices and significant focus in the greater South Central area with Madison, two offices in the Northeast in Appleton and Green Bay, in the Southeast, Racine and Kenosha. And just this calendar year, we opened up an office in La Crosse and Viroqua, embracing about 10 rural counties in that area. WWBIC has many local, regional, national, and even international partnerships and some of the consulting we've done through the years. And WWBIC came out of the women's economic empowerment movement and out of the microlending movement. And from day one, we focused our efforts on women, on people of color, specifically Black entrepreneurs and Black business owners, Hispanic, Latinx, on lower wealth individuals. At WWBIC, we call those individuals pre-rich, and also on veterans and military connected family. Why? Is because in each case, isms still exist. And in each case, there is an unlevel playing field and direct inequity and inequality. And so what WWBIC tries to do is shore up the ground with a strong footing and a level playing field for anybody who wants to start, strengthen, or grow a business. And we have electrical engineer here, Milwaukee kayak business, Pedals by Felicia in the Southeast area, Taranga, Venezuelan restaurant in the Madison area, photographer, and the like. Next slide. So again, hope and opportunity. These individuals are in the heart of Milwaukee, both former nurses, well, still nurses, and they created a community-based residential facility in the heart of Milwaukee. Hope and opportunity really centers our table. A long time ago, someone asked me, Bill Gates, the middle of his table is about a computer on everybody's desk. And, a long time ago, we thought, whoa, everybody's going to have a computer. And now we have a computer in our glasses, a computer in our wristband, a computer on our phones, and everywhere. But at that time, it was sort of visionary. And so WWBIC looks at the vision in the middle of our table as providing that hope, but also providing opportunity. And here's a quote from a client, Lula May. I think her business is in the West Allis area. But WWBIC believed in me. I mean, sometimes individuals have very supportive family members that maybe don't have the business acumen, and sometimes individuals don't necessarily have a real support system, and WWBIC can provide that role too. Next slide. So women in economics, just going through these quickly, 44% of women are the primary breadwinners in their household. 39% of the country's investable assets are with women. And in 2030, women will control 2/3 of our nation's wealth. Just a footnote there, part of that is because women do outlive men. And so again, you can see the assets that are moved on. But these are facts, economic facts, something to think about, something to perhaps leverage in the work or in the business that you have. Women of influence is one of my favorite slides. We have a great, women of influence through the Milwaukee, or through the Business Journal in Milwaukee. Women have been the majority of voters since 1964, and your voice is your vote is your voice, and the importance of that, not about bipartisanship, but about being informed voters as we vote individuals on a local level, statewide level, national level. So women entrepreneurs, cutting right to it, 11.6 million women own businesses in the United States. 4 out of every 10 businesses, 40% are women-owned. Women-owned businesses generate 1.7 trillion in revenues and employ 9 million, nearly 10 million. The number of women-owned businesses has increased dramatically, 31 times between 72 and 2018. Again, some of these are a little dated statistics because they use census data and information, and that always takes a couple years to sort of ping in there. Revenues rose from 8.1 billion to 1.8 trillion over that period of time. And 47% of women-owned phones are owned by women of color. So again, very significant. Women around, but almost 50% of women-owned businesses are owned by women of color. So did you know that total employment of women-owned businesses rose 21%, while for all businesses it declined? So again, in some ways, if not for women-owned businesses out there, small, medium, and large, where would we be with some of those employment issues, employing individuals, creating those businesses in our urban and rural communities? Next slide. So economic independence is one of my favorite slides here, sheds light on the world. This individual now owns a retail store, also does all of her own image and design, has beautiful cards, and was actually the artist in residence at the Pfister about a year ago. So she just represents so much to me, was an attorney, and then decided, I don't want to do this attorney stuff anymore. She was one of those 17%, I want to start this own business and vision that I've had. So economic independence really is a transformation, particularly for women, around freedom and around power and around abundance. Next slide. Forward adelante. I put this slide in because a significant and growing and very entrepreneurial community is the Hispanic community, and Milwaukee and Wisconsin, no exception. Our growth in Hispanic-owned businesses and our outreach, and if you look at WWBIC's website, it's in English and Spanish, handfuls of staff in all of our markets that are bilingual and bicultural. So really, really, really trying to put any kind of challenge of language and so on aside so we can reach entrepreneurs that want to start businesses. And these two gentlemen own this business, which is an amazing cake store in the near south side of Milwaukee. So opening. So WWBIC services, going into a quick WWBIC commercial here, quality business, education and training, micro and small business loans, I'll talk about that, but our credits go direct lending from $1,000 to $250,000, a lot of one-on-one business support, and also some financial capability. Individuals coming to us with bankruptcies in the past, colorful credit histories, cash flow issues for themselves, their business, and really helping them on that financial empowerment side. Next slide. Who do we serve? Exactly what we talk about 75% of our clients, this is in 2020, women. In Milwaukee, 88% of our clients, people of color, and about 55% statewide, 60% low and moderate income. And this flipped a little bit last year due to really the economic and health crisis. About 55% of the businesses that we served were existing and 45% startup. Usually that's more like 65% startup and 35% existing businesses. But again, this past year and a half has been about keeping businesses alive and flourishing as we get past this hard crisis. So business education is a great story. As a woman and a husband and wife who always had a dream of having their own independent pet supply store. And this is in downtown Kenosha. Got a business plan through WWBIC, got a loan through WWBIC, and ended up opening a second store in the Kenosha market. So small is beautiful. So business education 2020, we looked, because of the health and economic crisis, we really began doing almost everything virtually. We just flipped that like other businesses had a pivot in March of 2020. Prior to that, 85% of our programming and training was on ground, 15% was online or on demand. So obviously we had to switch that to 100%. So again, like anything, all individuals and all businesses and university at Marquette and Town Bank all had a pivot too. But our topics for our training is entrepreneurship. I'm thinking about starting a business. Does that make sense? Business planning, marketing, financing, bookkeeping, technology, personal finance, IT information. We did a lot more roundtables and talking with people, having the Anne Maries and Bonnies of the world present about how they pivoted their restaurant, how they addressed with becoming virtual, how they looked at different products and services. So a lot more talking with people, especially because people were so Zoom tired after a while. But generally, we're really a high touch, hands-on. We leverage entrepreneurs themselves, attorneys, bankers, accountants. And again, our training is in English and in Spanish. Business planning, we have a couple series, but one that really works well is Start, Run, and Grow. It's usually 8 weeks. It's web-based. It's using a live plan. There is a fee for it on a sliding scale basis. And a little bit of the training that just took place, you can see to get a feel for it. So you want to start a business. ABCs of business planning, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. This is, of course, it's Sidlali from Antigua Latin Cafe, who began her business on Wisconsin Avenue, moved to West Dallas. She grew up at her father's restaurant business. Now her children have grown up at her business. She does excellent catering as well as empanadas in a food cart. Financial capability real quick. These individuals are living now in a home of their own. They were previously living in public housing in the city of Milwaukee. Next slide. So again, our financial training programs talk about saving plans, smart borrowing practices, issues around identity theft, credit repair, and how we need to have sometimes recovery there, and saving and investing. The series itself is called Make Your Money Talk. We see hundreds of individuals through that. It's a lovely program. This individual too was formerly living in public housing and now is standing in front of the porch with her children of a home of her own. Small business loans. So again, 1,000 to $250,000. Our average loan size is in the 30,000. So our real sweet spot are loans under 100,000, but we do a variety. Fixed rates according to prime rates, usually about prime +5. Terms can go out 10 years, but most of our loans turn in about 4.5 years. Borrower does need to be active in the business, so it's not a passive business. Funds can be used for anything. So very different from a bank. You know, bank is usually assets and build outs or what have you. Ours is inventory, working capital, equipment, things like that, which again is often hard for banks to lend on. You can apply online. Again, everything is also in Spanish, and we have some great information sessions on just how to apply for that loan, and the team can help in any of our markets too. Next slide. Business consulting, a lot of one-on-one. This individual, it's the woman that owns this trucking company. It's a Hispanic woman-owned trucking company that's grown tremendously. And the one-on-one support, it's all not only done live, but we also have this really great WWBIC Initiate portal that focuses on money, management, and what's my third, marketing. And so 24/7 entrepreneurs can't sleep at night thinking I got to work on my marketing plans. They can go in and get small vignettes and strategies on marketing. And again, that's in English and Spanish too. And we think of WWBIC as the middle of the hourglass that knows a lot of different programs going out there and try to provide that in a formidable way to our clients that reach out to us. The diversity in our loan portfolio, we're holding about 650 distinct businesses in our loan portfolio, totaling about 25 million. And you can see that food and related services is about a quarter of that portfolio. Manufacturing is high, retail, healthcare, and so on. And these are all dated as of 2020, what that portfolio looked like. Next slide. Kiva, another of our partner programs. So WWBIC, Kiva at WWBIC. WWBIC manages the Kiva program for the state of Wisconsin. They are nano loans. We think of WWBIC as a micro lender and Kiva as a nano lender. Loans from 1,000 to 15,000. Crowdsourcing only for-profit businesses, utilizing PayPal. The co-founder of PayPal is the co-founder of Kiva. And you're not granting the money to this business, you are lending the money, but you're lending it at 0%. So again, if you're not sure about Kiva, definitely take a look. Our veteran space, this is the one program that we embrace more than Wisconsin. We embrace Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, providing entrepreneur support to current active military who will retire in the next year, and then to veterans and military connected family. How to start a business, how to grow a business, specific loan funds for veterans, anything veterans around the entrepreneurship. And volunteers, I always like to do a pitch. We're always looking for good people to be a mentor, be a coach, present a class, be part of WWBIC's fabric and serving on a loan committee or an advisory committee. Next slide. Over 400 individuals are current volunteers right now. This is the contact for our volunteer coordinator. This restaurant is Chef Paz in West Dallas, came from Peru, had owned restaurants in Peru, took some WWBIC classes and started this business there. And in terms of those volunteers, again, the bankers, the accountants, attorneys, web developers, all of that is a need for the work that WWBIC does in helping out micro and small businesses. Next slide. And I'll close with saying thank you. This picture was taken pre-COVID when we could all be together and hug and kiss. And this was our team at the time in front of the governor's executive residence where we have an event each year. So thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations and then speaking live with our two entrepreneurs. Good. It's our office locations and a couple other statewide resources for review. And now we're moving on to my contact information. You can call me or email me if any additional questions. And now we're moving on to Geri, who's going to talk a little bit about the small business majority. And I've had the opportunity of working with her over the past couple of years and truly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Wendy. Hi, my name is Geri Aglipay with the Small Business Majority. Next slide, please. I'm the director of the Midwest region for our offices, and I also oversee our efforts nationally across our offices for the Small Business Majority. To give it a background, we are a 501c3 nonprofit education and policy organization, and we seek to empower America's small businesses, but also the self-employed, to make sure that they support a thriving and equitable economy. We have a particular focus on businesses in underserved communities and by individuals who've been impacted by systemic inequalities. We have 8 regional offices across the country. And as I said, we're an education and policy organization. Not only do we engage in providing trainings with our partners, such as WBCs, Women's Business Centers, like WWBIC, but also SBDCs, economic development corporations, chambers, nonprofit organizations to deliver training for free to support our business service providers and entrepreneurship service organizations to better make sure people match and get the counseling and advising they need from organizations like WWBIC. But we also engage in advocacy. We make sure your voice is heard at the table as small business owners. As Wendy had alluded to, you know, a majority of women in this country are the voters since 1964. We want to make sure that small business owners, especially women who are mothers, your voices are heard at the table. We provide education and resources through our venturize.org hub, which is a really wonderful resource to peruse. And also, as Small Business Majority is a founding organization of the Responsible Business Lending Coalition, along with groups such as Axion and Aspen Institute, there you can also find how you can avoid predatory lending, of which women tend to be more targeted because of the inability to access capital at times. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we've actually conducted more than 500 events nationwide, connecting 57,000 businesses to online resources, as well as to our partner resources as well. Within our network, we have over 85,000 small business owners, as I noted, 60% of which are women and 64% of which are owners of color. Next slide. What we do in terms of our agenda for women is we seek to foster equity through our education and policy efforts. We have a policy platform, which you can find at smallbusinessmajority.org, in which we advocate for federal and state policies, including Wisconsin state policy for women, to support equitable growth of small business owners who are women. Education and partnerships geared towards women, but we're also an ecosystem builder. We convene stakeholders to strengthen the safety net support system for women entrepreneurs, so they don't just get the financial capital they need, but also the social and knowledge capital, which so often lack because of systems embedded regarding sexism, but which also affect ageism, is also affecting the systemic bias, as we are seeing the majority of businesses that are starting up are over age 45 and above, but also 4 in 10 small business owners are actually white male. That means 6 out of 10 are people of color, including women of color as well, and women. So that diversity of how we are focusing our efforts at Small Business Majority and through our partners is how we seek to advance equity for women to grow, start, and scale their businesses. Next slide. And so I want to give a bit of background on women's entrepreneurship. You heard a little bit from Wendy. I've got several slides here. As you may have heard, we've got over 9 million firms that generate $1.4 trillion in revenue, as Wendy noted. But that's also creating jobs for other people, but also other women as well. Next slide. Some of the factors impacting women-owned businesses. First of all, why is it important? Why are we here to talk about women in ownership for this series? Business equity is actually the next source of wealth to build for women in this country following home equity. So it's incredibly important that organizations like WWBIC exist to provide that free assistance, but also, as you can see from their financial capability programs, to support asset building for women overall. 90% of women business owners are actually self-employed and have no employees other than themselves. And women tend to cluster in retail and service-based industries, childcare, home care, personal beauty services, healthcare, real estate and management consulting. So think about that when we're thinking about designing inclusive tactics to support the growth of women-owned businesses. As Wendy noted, there's a number of roughly 33%, I believe, are the main breadwinners, but combined as being the co-breadwinners in America, women are actually 2/3 of breadwinners or co-breadwinners in America of their households. And investments in female founders, startups actually perform 63% better than investments with all male founders. The factors also impacting how you invest in women-owned businesses is that women owners reinvest profits in local communities at a higher rate than men. And hopefully you can hear a little bit about that from the two owners today, who will be talking about the impact of their businesses in the community and how they support them. Next slide. But the challenge is, of course, women and also minority-owned firms face significant barriers. They typically start small in size with less capital, lower approval rates from bank loans, and smaller dollar amounts than males. In fact, despite applying for conventional business loans at the same rate as men, women actually receive only 4.4% of those loans. And the reason why women businesses often stay small, it's a capital challenges to grow. 88% of women businesses, their revenues never cut it over $100,000. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we better support the systems to address the needs of women to better acquire the skills and the capital, as well as skills to manage that capital cash flow to break over $100,000 and support the wealth building capacity so that business equity really truly is the next best way to build wealth next to home ownership. The challenge is that when women don't receive the capital they need, is they become more vulnerable to predatory lending. And I'm sure many of our partners, including Wendy and her staff at WWBIC, have heard this. You know, before the pandemic, we were hearing that rates can go as high as 4,000%. With the pandemic and the need to get that funding, we have heard the rates are sometimes going for predatory lending as high as 4,000%. So it's incredibly important to uplift the assistance that's out there with the small business development centers and women's business centers such as WWBIC for women to turn to advise how to navigate that capital. Next slide. How to strengthen women's business ownership. Next slide. A systemic approach that we want to take with women is to provide the knowledge, resources, and trainings for women entrepreneurs. How do you start and plan and grow a business, especially from home? Because women actually start their home-based businesses before they may even convert to a retail space, higher than men do. How to legally be a business on paper. As we saw during the last year and a half of this pandemic, so many businesses were not operating properly or were not set up to even receive the funds, even though they were conducting business and operations. They may not have been legally a business on paper because of a lack of how things were set up to begin with initially. How do you identify and navigate safe capital? Again, avoiding predatory lending, but also managing that capital. And utilizing financial statements to review your business position is another condition to think about when we're talking about what is it our women's knowledge needs so that they make informed decisions with their businesses that's not risking their personal wealth and savings. Next slide. Some of the systemic approaches we want to take, I did address predatory lending, but it's also to ensure fair access to capital for women. enforcing bank regulations to combat systemic sexism, which is especially prevalent for women of color and women who are in underserved areas. Now, it wasn't until, of course, 1988, the Women's Business Ownership Act. It's hard to believe that so late in our country's history, women actually needed to have a male cosigner for a business loan. It's one of the reasons why women are still a little bit far behind in terms of building business equity from their business or building wealth from their business. And despite laws such as the Women's Business Ownership Act or the Fair Equal Credit Opportunity Act, there is, from research, rampant systemic and individual bias against women that still occurs. Oftentimes, not often, but actually, regularly, it's not uncommon to hear, they asked about my husband at the bank. Again, an example of individual bias against women and that gender bias, which impacts reflecting that 4.4% rate that women receive loans compared to men. Increasing predatory lending practices, which targets women disproportionately, is another systemic approach to assuring that women receive the knowledge capital they need to strengthen their business ownership. Next slide. Other systemic approaches that we need to be taking as a system to support women entrepreneurs is that training, counseling, and financial products, such as the products offered by WWBIC, they're inclusive and addresses the unique needs of women entrepreneurs. When we think about women, they often, when they start a business, may be working another job or two jobs, while they're also managing a family and children. So, for example, some organizations have partnered with other nonprofits to provide free subsidized child or family care for their elder parents during business trainings, which is something that especially low and moderate women income need in underserved areas. There's also credit barriers, access to capital. What are those credit barriers that women have? How should we think about the fact that women make less than men, and so they're relying more on credit and have lower credit scores? How do we design more flexible credit and capital, understanding what the data is as to why women have lower credit scores? The gender wealth gap, we do know that women own less than men. They make less than men in pay and assets to start their business. But there's also the debt gap. How are we also addressing women who want to grow their businesses or start their businesses? The fact that there is a debt gap and carry more student debt than men because they actually obtain college degrees at higher rates than men. So these are some systemic conditions and approaches to consider when we want to support strengthening the ecosystem and safety net for women to grow their businesses. Next slide. I talked about predatory lending at responsiblebusinesslending.org, which is the Responsible Business Lending Coalition. You can actually access the Small Business Borrowers Bill of Rights as to what the 6 principles are for small business owners. Again, it is a tool to use to combat online predatory lending, because as of this moment, there is no federal law that regulates online lending. So it's the Wild West. There's some great players, and there's not so great players as well. So make sure you visit this site and use this tool, but also continue to work with the free advisors that are there to support the growth of your businesses. Next slide. And you can also visit smallbusinessmajorityventurize.org site. That also has the tools such as a tip sheet on how to avoid predatory lending. We have it in Spanish, English, and some of those tip sheets have even been translated into 11 AAPI languages, thanks to our national partners as well. But at venturize.org, you can also go to Match Finder. At Match Finder, you can be matched with mission-based lenders who could support small business, startup, or capital costs when oftentimes there's a challenge getting it at the larger, more mainstream banks, with nonprofit institutions such as CDFIs, micro lenders as well, business centers, also economic development groups. That's another tool that you can use to navigate and learn in your spare time, or to supplement the counseling that you're getting with SBDCs or WBCs like WWBIC. Next slide. And our advocacy and research. What can we do systematically to support women, considering that there is a gender wealth gap, and how can we really strengthen this notion and the research that to support women building wealth through their businesses? There's human infrastructure, workforce policies for the sustainability of women-owned businesses, paid family medical leave, childcare tax credits, and retirement security. Next slide. Women retire with 80 times less wealth than men, and the median retirement savings in America is $3,000. Majority of Wisconsin small business owners actually support automatic retirement savings for small business owners to support their employees. And in fact, yesterday, Governor Evers just declared October National Retirement Security Month. Next slide. And you can learn more about Retirement Secure Choice from Small Business Majority's website. There's also 7 in 10 small business owners. We're hearing a lot about, paid family medical leave during COVID. 7 in 10 small business owners support the Family Act. This is allowing for an insurance program funded by employee and employers to take some time off to care for family members. Next slide, please. Lack of affordable childcare. We're hearing this nationwide. It's with the reconciliation bill and the infrastructure bill in Congress, but more than 1 in 3 small business owners lack access to childcare, and that's a barrier to starting a business. Next slide. And small business owners actually support policies that expand access to affordable childcare and improving childcare credits. It's actually 70% of small business owners in this country. Next slide. Before I go on, I talk about these policies regarding retirement security, paid family leave, childcare tax credits, because women are actually the top 3 spokespeople to advance these policies are veterans, women who are mothers, and small business owners. So next slide. When we think that mothers and small business owners are the top 2 messengers in this country on policies, next to veterans, trusted more than churches and large corporations, think about how you can be that advocate for yourself. Wendy said we started listening to people during COVID, we're one-on-one with the business owners as well. When we think about that, think about how you can also have your voice on how these policies impact the growth of your business, paid family medical leave, retirement security, and such. Next slide. Next slide. And so if you would like to be a spokesperson, we have spokespeople here who are examples from Wisconsin to talk about some of these policies in the state of Wisconsin and federally. Next slide. And please join our spokesperson program if you'd like, but we also have a holiday gift guide. So if you're on this call and you are a small business owner, you'd like to support, or you want to support small business owners and you know of one who could be on our holiday gift guide, please refer them to our holiday gift guide where they can be in our directory for the upcoming holidays. Next slide. And this is our information to stay in touch and to connect with Small Business Majority. And with that, I want to turn back to my colleague, Wendy at WWBIC, Wendy Baumann at WWBIC, who will have the discussion webinar with our small business owners. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Geri. I learned some things and I thought I knew a lot about what you did, so that's great. So let's jump into this right away. Anne Marie Arroyo, MOXIE, Troubles and Sons, Bonnie Edwards, Edwards Tutoring Enterprise. We want to hear from you. Why don't we start with Anne Marie? Tell us a little bit about self. Tell us a little bit then about, okay, I woke up one day and I'm going to start a restaurant with your partner, and how that went. We don't have a lot of time, so give us the quick, and then we'll go to Bonnie, and then we'll try to sneak in one more question. Go ahead, Anne Marie.
Sure. Thank you, Wendy, and thanks for the invitation today. Just a Cliff Notes version. My wife and I lost our jobs through corporate America at Harley-Davidson in December of 2015. In January of 2016, we were already personal members of the LGBT Wisconsin Chamber, and they had an event down at Manpower, and we attended. There was a breakout session called "So You Want to Start a Business" by WWBIC, and we actually did want to start a business, and it was just fortunate for us that they had this breakout session. We didn't even know that was going to be on the agenda, but that's how we got our ball rolling with, we had already identified we wanted to open a restaurant in our neighborhood, and WWBIC was a valuable resource for us to tap into. We didn't know about WWBIC, but they helped us from the very beginning, from business plan, identifying timelines to build out to opening our restaurant. So that's it in a nutshell.
Good. And just, okay, corporate America, and again, a change in employment. But you always somewhere before that had this like entrepreneurial piece in you. Were you one of the 17%, both you and your wife?
It was more so me. I
Okay.
always wanted to own my own business, and I've had a million ideas over the years. And it really took me getting fired from Harley, basically, through this downsizing. I like to say that instead of a layoff, because they weren't going to call me back, and I didn't want to go back because I really wanted to venture out on my own for forever. And restaurant industry is something I knew and was near and dear to my heart. It was my first job as a 15-year-old, worked in the industry 15 years, then went on to banking, manufacturing, and landed back on the restaurant business because I knew that I understood that business. I was passionate about it, but I also knew that all of the skills that I've learned over the years through not only my education at UWM, but also through working in corporate, that all of the skills that I've learned and developed were transferable to any business, really. But it helped that I had a passion for the restaurant business.
Cool. No, those transferable skills, we talk about that a lot at WWBIC too, which is really, really key. Bonnie, tell us a little bit about you. And one day you woke up and decided you were also really, I think, in sort of corporate America, and then woke up and said, hey, I'm going to do this really important tutoring business. You just go off of mute. There we go.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy. And actually, thank you for the opportunity and the invitation. It's so inspiring to be here. And just a snapshot of how I got to this place. My husband and I, Geri, we are co-partners in this business of tutoring K through 12. And we sort of came out of semi-retirement. As you know, I'm a retired educator. He's a retired a chief photojournalist from Channel 12. And so we spent decades in the workforce. And so we bring a lot of experience. I think for me, it was natural for me to sort of fall into this type of industry because I'm a retired teacher, but also because I came from a family of entrepreneurs. You know, my parents were entrepreneurs. They invested in, they were always in management or in some type of managerial position. My dad was a foreman at Pabst Brewery. My mother was a district manager for Avon Products. You might remember Avon Products. And they also own the spirits business. And so I personally come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so it was natural for me to sort of flow into education because that's something that I've always been passionate about. And so we had a situation where we were able to invest some of our own money to buy this franchise. We were the only African-American owned franchise in the entire state of Wisconsin called Club Z. That was pre-COVID. And we were able to contract with partners like the Boys and Girls Club, which was great. It was fantastic to be able to go back into the school and really work with those little third graders. And they brought so much joy to me. It just sort of reminded me of how much I missed the classroom. But you don't hear a lot about teachers and teachers going into businesses. And if there are any teachers, in fact, welcome to those of you who are listening. If any of you are educators, there's such a wide opportunity for you. WWBIC was a huge support for us because at the time when COVID hit, we were just entering into a second contract with the Boys and Girls Club at a different school. And when COVID hit, that just sort of put everything on hold. And WWBIC, thank goodness for WWBIC. And Wendy, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I've been following you for 30 years. And I've always known about WWBIC, even as a young adult, just starting off. But I never thought that I would seek out WWBIC to help us with capital, which they did. And it was because of our involvement with WWBIC, getting the initial capital so that we can sustain the business. Then when COVID hit, we had to repivot. But what WWBIC was able to allow us to do based on the grants that we were eligible for, we actually paid off Club Z with the help and support of WWBIC. We paid the franchise off, which really freed us up a great deal, because then we did not have to pay royalty fees because we were a franchise. We were one of 500 in the country, in addition to Canada. So WWBIC, because of WWBIC, we were able to pay that franchise off, repivot, restructure the business, get our certification through the state of Wisconsin as a minority-owned business. And now we're in the process of hopefully working out a new partnership with the Boys and Girls Club and the Milwaukee Public Schools, so that we can get into the system. I'm very comfortable with navigating myself because I'm a former educator, so I'm very comfortable with talking with different individuals. And I think a big part of what I think is needed in terms of helping to support mothers and fathers with their children, particularly with the pandemic. There's so many of our children have lost some very significant gains in terms of academics. So there's a huge need for that. And I think if there's some way in policy or in foundational that maybe organizations like yours, Wendy, and organizations like the IWL and the young lady that just spoke, if you can figure out ways to connect businesses, small businesses like ours that provide that kind of service with parents who are truly, truly in need, and our children are really, really suffering. And so I think we're in this at the right time to hopefully make a difference. I'm in it for the long haul. So
good. No, thank you for sharing that story. I just want to get a couple more answers out of you too. Squeeze you out here in a quick time. Anne Marie, if you could share how many jobs, more or less, I know it's ebbed and flowed, but more or less when you're fully functioning, the number of jobs that you're supporting through your two businesses, and your biggest challenge, how you overcame it. And then Bonnie, the same thing. So just sort of quick, and then we'll see if there's some questions.
At MOXIE right now, we have approximately 30 employees, and over at our Trouble and Sons Pizzeria, we have almost 40. And some of the biggest challenges have been staffing. It sounds like we have a lot of people. However, not everyone is available to work all of our open shifts every week. So it's really interesting that we look at our team roster and realize, oh, wow, we still have 2 open shifts we can't fill, yet we have all of these employees. But there are a myriad of reasons why we can't fill those. And I think Geri touched on some of them, like childcare, for example. We have a lot of people who aren't willing to work 2 or 3 jobs anymore. They've made some decisions that, I can't, and it's not sustainable. And I think that's one thing that we've learned through COVID so far as employers and as individuals, that we have to find another way that's sustainable in terms of making a living wage by working 1 job, not 3 jobs. That's been one of our biggest challenges. But what we've done to overcome some of that is we've become like a family affair. So we have mothers, daughters working together. We have husbands and wives. We have husband, wife, one of their children working with us. So that has been really amazing in terms of helping us and helping them too. With they get to spend some time together, plus they get to make some money, and it's a win-win situation. So that's one way we have learned to overcome some of those staffing challenges.
Good, thank you. And that's a lot of jobs, Anne Marie, a lot of jobs. Bonnie, again, a very different business model, different piece, but sort of job creation, biggest challenge, how you got over it, and not necessarily in this past year and a half of, crisis, but just overall.
Oh, absolutely, Wendy. Thank you. Overall, we have approximately 21 professional tutors in our pool, and we have an active 9 right now. I think our biggest, and by the way, those tutors are professional in that they are either retired educators themselves that has worked in various districts, or they're actively teaching in their classrooms even today, as well as some of the retired business professionals. And we recruit through ZipRecruiter, through Indeed. And we have very specific requirements for becoming a tutor. As far as our biggest challenge, I would have to say access, with regards to partnering with organizations like, again, the Boys and Girls Club, various school districts, not necessarily Milwaukee Public Schools. However, it appears that MPS has the greatest need right now. And organizations like Ho Chunk Nation or Potawatomi, wherever there is a need to help bring the students up to the next academic level so that they're successful, that's where we like to turn our attention. We do have private pay, but as we've already saw through the statistics and data, parents, it's very hard financially for them to meet that. And the best way I think to overcome that is to create situations where parents can take their children where those services are being offered, tutoring services are being offered.
Good. Well, a lot of jobs. Great. Andrea, you want to come back, bring us back? I know we're about closing, or I don't know if we can squeeze one more question or if we're done. Can't do overtime. It was so good. We got to do overtime.
Thank you. Well, I've asked for questions. I had a couple sent in advance, so I will ask one of them. And it actually goes to something that both Wendy and Geri touched on, in that where women typically get involved in kind of education or food or fashion or jewelry or something like that. And I'm wondering if there's a danger, right? Avon, and I love, Bonnie, that your mom used to work for Avon. I think Mary Kay back in the day, right? All of that. And yet is there a danger in some ways, is that just a giant Ponzi scheme, right? What are we doing? And how do some of those things kind of play out in that these choices themselves are gendered? Is that a good thing? Let's stay in our lane. These are our strengths. This is what we know. And do you provide additional advice, or what would you say to women who are like, that's not what I want to do, or not my strength?
I'll give 2 seconds, and I'd love to hear from Anne Marie and from Bonnie. But my part is that I think I was brought up with anything is possible. Number one. But number 2, especially with WWBIC and business and so on, is risk mitigation. Okay, so like, what are the challenges? What are the potential risks? How will I mitigate those? So a nurse, great career, possibly good money, depending on your perspective, solid and so on, but wants to start her own home health care. Well, risk mitigation is that if it doesn't work, that business, she could go back to nursing, could pay off a loan, could do things, so on and so forth. So to me, that's the piece. Possibility, don't get caught up in women start these businesses and go into these businesses. Absolutely not. And we don't see that at all. We see women in all different businesses, and that's how we want to live our life forward with that. But risk mitigation is good just in life in general. But Anne Marie, Bonnie, thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The risk mitigation is truly a real thing, because we, as I mentioned before, without WWBIC's help with getting capital, and without being able to qualify for grants, for federal grants and state grants, I don't know how we would have been able to do it. And we really had to go back to the table, my partner, husband, and I, and really talk about, well, what can we do right now that would minimize our risks with the business, but yet stay open and still provide those needed tutoring services for children that were in need. And it was because of WWBIC and what was available to us allowed us to be able to stay in business. And we're so looking forward to expanding right now.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Sure.
Just add a note on that too, is the business plan is so important, and that's part of your risk mitigation plan too. So having your business plan, looking at what your timeline is, looking at plan B if some COVID hits. So we had to use that overused word, pivot to online ordering, and we got that going because we didn't have that before COVID. So that allowed us another way to generate revenue. And then WWBIC too is such a valuable resource for businesses that are deemed high risk. Like with traditional funding, they don't want to do any startup restaurants. Restaurants have a high fail rate, but WWBIC supports businesses like that. They believe in the individual or individuals, and they help provide. The biggest barrier is funding, and that's what got us going. MOXIE would not be in existence without WWBIC. we maxed out the loan amount that we could take. And there is no way we would have received that support from a traditional financing company or bank. But that is half the battle, and they do help you, and they provide a support system for helping you define what is your plan B, so that if something should arise, you are able to sustain your business.
And
And
you said my
also-
favorite word, business plan and business planning, like huge heart here. Yay. Who,
Yeah.
what, when, where, why. So key.
Love it. All right, I am going to shift. If you are in the audience listening to this and inspired and want to do more, I want to let you know first, thank you to this team and this wonderful group of speakers that got us thinking about all of these great things, and that our next session is going to be broadly on women in financial intelligence, and that we are going to focus in on individual smaller group meetings in this where you can meet with particular advisors, either about ownership. We are in fact going to have Kamal Jackson back from WWBIC talking to us, Raquel Filmanowitz from BMO Harris, also looking at community development, and then additional experts either in angel investing 101 tied to our first session that we had, or just financial planning, as Wendy said, plan, and really building up wealth management in our finance 101. So that is going to be our next session on December 2nd. And I'd love to thank our sponsors again, Town Bank as our presenting sponsor and generator. This is going to be a great opportunity. I also want to put on everybody's calendar, our first annual gala for IWL will be March 8th, Tuesday, March 8th. That is International Women's Day. Terrific day to celebrate women and our accomplishments. So we're going to invite you to join us in the Marquette Ballroom, but mark that on your calendar now. Finally, I'd like to thank our IWL team. We have a great group of people behind the scenes doing all of this. So I am very grateful for everybody's work, and they are all listed on our slide. Last slide is just to give you all contact information. Please do reach out to us at iwl@marquette.edu if you're interested in gathering any information, getting on our mailing list, working with us further as we advance women in equity in Milwaukee, and do follow us on social media for more events and information. And with that, thank you to all of our panelists. Wonderful conversation. Grateful for all of you joining us. And thank you. Have a terrific rest of your day.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody.